Sometimes the most ordinary Tuesday can become the day that changes everything. Sarah Martinez thought she was just another small-town farm girl living a quiet life in rural Montana. She had no idea that within 72 hours her name would be whispered in military circles, her story would reach the highest levels of the Pentagon, and a group of the world's most elite soldiers would be mobilized because of what happened to her on a dusty road outside Millfield. The truth is, evil doesn't announce itself with sirens or warnings. It doesn't wait for convenient moments or choose appropriate victims. Sometimes it arrives on 35 roaring motorcycles, carrying men who believe that isolated farmland and a lone young woman represent nothing more than an opportunity. They had no way of knowing that this particular farm girl had a brother in Delta Force, or that Marcus Martinez had spent 8 years learning exactly how to find people who didn't want to be found. What started as the worst day of Sarah's life would become a legend that recruits still hear about in hushed tones during training. This is the true story of how a farming community learned that family loyalty runs deeper than most people imagine, and how 35 bikers discovered that some sisters are protected by forces they never saw coming. The first mistake the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club made was choosing Sarah Martinez. The second was thinking they could disappear into the vast American countryside without consequences. They had no idea they had just declared war on someone who had spent his entire adult life perfecting the art of bringing justice to those who thought they were beyond its reach. This is that story. Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she loaded the last bale of hay onto the old Ford pickup truck. The Montana sun was relentless that Tuesday afternoon, beating down on the sprawling Martinez family farm with an intensity that made even the cattle seek shade under the few scattered oak trees. At 23 years old, Sarah had been managing most of the farm operations since her father's heart attack 2 years earlier. Her mother, Elena, handled the finances and the household, while Sarah dealt with everything from feeding livestock to repairing fence posts. The Martinez farm stretched across 2,400 acres of some of the most beautiful land in Cascade County. Rolling hills covered in wheat and barley extended as far as the eye could see, interrupted only by pastures where their cattle grazed peacefully. The family had owned this land for 3 generations, ever since Sarah's great-grandfather, Miguel Martinez, had saved enough money working in the copper mines to buy his first 160 acres in 1952. Sarah loved everything about farm life, from the early morning routine of feeding the animals to the satisfaction of seeing a successful harvest. She was strong, capable, and independent. Exactly the kind of person who thrived in the demanding world of agriculture. Standing 5 feet 6 inches tall with dark brown hair that she usually kept in a practical ponytail, Sarah had the kind of quiet confidence that came from knowing she could handle whatever challenges the day might bring. The Martinez family had always been close-knit, but they had become even more tightly bonded since Thomas Martinez's heart attack. Elena, a former schoolteacher who had given up her career to help run the farm, often worried about Sarah taking on so much responsibility at such a young age. But Sarah insisted she loved the work, and besides, she wasn't entirely alone in managing everything. Marcus Martinez, Sarah's older brother by 4 years, had been sending money home regularly ever since he joined the army 8 years earlier. What the family didn't discuss in detail, even among themselves, was exactly what Marcus did for the military. They knew he was special forces, and they knew his job took him to dangerous places around the world, but Marcus had always been careful about sharing specifics. The less his family knew about his work, the safer it was for everyone involved. Sarah had always been proud of her brother, even though she sometimes worried about him during his long deployments. Marcus had been her protector growing up, always standing up for her when schoolyard bullies tried to pick on the farm girl who rode the bus 40 minutes each way to attend school in town. When he left for basic training, he made Sarah promise to take care of their parents, but he also made their parents promise to take care of Sarah. The relationship between the Martinez siblings was special. Despite the 4-year age difference, they had always been best friends. Marcus had taught Sarah how to drive when she was 12, how to shoot when she was 14, and how to change the oil in the farm trucks when she was 16. In return, Sarah had been Marcus's biggest supporter when he decided to join the military instead of staying to help run the farm. Every few weeks, Marcus would call home for long conversations with each family member. He would discuss farm business with his father, family finances with his mother, and everything else with Sarah. During their most recent call, just 3 days earlier, Marcus had sounded tired but happy. He was back in the United States after a deployment that had lasted 6 months, and he was looking forward to taking some leave time to visit home soon. Sarah finished securing the load of hay bales and climbed into the truck's cab. She needed to deliver this load to the Patterson Ranch about 15 miles away, where a drought had left them short of feed for their horses. The Pattersons were good neighbors who had helped the Martinez family countless times over the years, so Sarah was happy to sell them hay at cost to help them through the difficult season. The drive to the Patterson ranch took her along County Road 47, a winding two-lane road that cut through some of the most isolated country in the area. For most of the 15-mile journey, Sarah wouldn't see another vehicle or even a house. The road climbed through rolling hills covered in native grassland, past abandoned homesteads that told the story of families who had tried and failed to make a living from the unforgiving land. Sarah enjoyed the solitude of these drives. With the radio playing classic country music and the windows down to catch the breeze, she found it peaceful to travel through the open countryside. The landscape reminded her why she loved Montana and why she had never seriously considered leaving for college or city life like many of her high school classmates. As she drove, Sarah thought about the conversation she'd had with her mother that morning. Elena had been encouraging her to think about taking some college courses, maybe in business or agriculture management. Sarah appreciated her mother's concern, but she was happy with her life on the farm. She enjoyed the physical work, the connection to the land, and the sense of accomplishment that came from successfully managing a complex operation. The first sign of trouble appeared in her rearview mirror when Sarah was about 8 miles from the Patterson ranch. She noticed a group of motorcycles in the distance, traveling much faster than the speed limit. At first, she wasn't concerned. Montana attracted many motorcycle enthusiasts who enjoyed touring through the scenic countryside, especially during the summer months. However, as the motorcycles got closer, Sarah began to feel uneasy. There were far more bikes than she had initially realized, and they were riding aggressively, weaving back and forth across both lanes of the road. Sarah slowed down and moved as far to the right as possible, hoping to let them pass quickly and safely. When the first motorcycles reached her truck, Sarah got her first clear look at the riders. They were not the typical motorcycle tourists who passed through the area. These men looked rough and dangerous, with leather jackets covered in patches and bandanas covering their faces. Several of them had weapons visible, including knives and what appeared to be pistols. Instead of passing her truck, the motorcycles began to surround her vehicle. Some rode alongside her truck while others moved ahead and behind, effectively boxing her in. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as she realized this was not a chance encounter with harmless travelers. The leader of the group, a massive man with gray hair and a beard, riding a customized Harley-Davidson, pulled alongside her driver's side window. He was wearing a leather vest with patches indicating he was a member of something called the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club. The man gestured aggressively for Sarah to pull over, but she kept driving, hoping to reach the Patterson Ranch or at least find another vehicle on the road. Sarah tried to speed up, but the hay bales made her truck heavy and slow to accelerate. The motorcycles had no trouble keeping pace with her, and several riders began making threatening gestures. One rider pulled ahead of her truck and began slowing down, forcing Sarah to reduce her speed to avoid hitting him. Finally, realizing she had no choice, Sarah pulled over at a wide spot in the road where a dirt access road led to an abandoned farmhouse. Her hands were shaking as she turned off the engine, but she tried to remain calm. Maybe these men just wanted directions, or maybe they were having mechanical trouble and needed help. As soon as Sarah stopped the truck, she was surrounded by 35 motorcycles and their riders. The men climbed off their bikes and approached her vehicle, and Sarah immediately realized that her situation was much worse than she had hoped. These were not people who needed directions or mechanical assistance. The leader, whose patches identified him as Cobra and president of the Iron Wolves, walked up to Sarah's door. He was enormous, probably 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighing well over 250 pounds. His arms were covered with tattoos, including several that depicted violence against women. When he spoke, his voice was rough and threatening. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Cobra said, leaning against Sarah's truck door. "Pretty little farm girl all alone on this empty road. You picked a bad day to be driving by yourself, sweetheart." Sarah tried to keep her voice steady as she replied, "I'm just delivering hay to a neighbor's ranch. I don't want any trouble." Cobra laughed, and several of the other bikers joined in. "Oh, you don't want any trouble? That's real funny. See, the thing is, we've been riding for about 6 hours now, and we're getting pretty bored. Then we see this cute little thing driving all alone, and we think maybe this is exactly the kind of excitement we've been looking for." Sarah realized that her situation was becoming desperate. She was 8 miles from the Patterson Ranch, at least 7 miles from any other house, and surrounded by 35 dangerous men, on an isolated road where no one was likely to pass by for hours. Her cell phone was in her purse on the passenger seat, but she couldn't reach for it without the bikers noticing. "Please," Sarah said. "I haven't done anything to you. Just let me continue on my way, and I won't tell anyone about this." Another biker, a thin man with missing teeth and needle marks on his arms, spoke up. "She ain't going nowhere, Cobra. Look at this place. Nobody's going to find her out here for days. We can have some fun, and then just disappear." Sarah's mind raced as she tried to think of options. The truck keys were still in the ignition, but she was surrounded and couldn't possibly drive away. She was a good shot with her father's hunting rifles, but she didn't have any weapons with her. Most importantly, she needed to find a way to contact Marcus or the local sheriff's department. Cobra reached for the door handle of Sarah's truck. "Why don't you step on out here, honey? We want to get to know you a little better." Sarah made a split-second decision. Instead of getting out of the truck, she suddenly started the engine and threw the vehicle into drive. She pressed the accelerator to the floor, hoping to break through the circle of motorcycles and escape. For a moment, it looked like her plan might work. Several bikers had to dive out of the way as the heavy truck lurched forward. But Sarah's truck was no match for 35 motorcycles, and within a few hundred yards, the bikers had surrounded her again. This time, several of them had weapons drawn, and they were clearly angry about her escape attempt. Cobra was furious. When Sarah was forced to stop again, he yanked open her door and grabbed her arm roughly. "You just made a big mistake, farm girl. We were gonna be nice to you, but now you've pissed us off." Sarah was pulled from the truck and surrounded by the entire group of bikers. She could see that several of them were under the influence of drugs or alcohol, which made them even more unpredictable and dangerous. The situation had gone from bad to terrifying in a matter of seconds. "Please," Sarah said, trying one more time to reason with them. "My family will be looking for me soon. People know where I went and when I'm supposed to be back." Cobra grinned, revealing several missing teeth. "Is that right? Well, then I guess we better get started before your family comes looking." What happened next would haunt Sarah for the rest of her life, but it would also set in motion a chain of events that the Iron Wolves could never have anticipated. As Sarah was dragged away from her truck toward the abandoned farmhouse, she had no way of knowing that her brother Marcus had just returned to Fort Bragg from his latest deployment, or that he had been trying to call her cell phone for the past hour to surprise her with news of his upcoming leave. Most importantly, the Iron Wolves had no idea that they had just made an enemy of Master Sergeant Marcus Martinez, a 12-year veteran of the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, better known as Delta Force. In a few hours, when Sarah failed to return home and her phone went straight to voicemail, Marcus would learn that his sister was missing, and that's when the real story would begin. Master Sergeant Marcus Martinez was sitting in his small apartment on Fort Bragg, North Carolina, enjoying the first quiet evening he'd had in 6 months. The deployment to Syria had been particularly challenging, involving weeks of reconnaissance missions behind enemy lines and 2 high-risk hostage rescue operations that had tested even his extensive training and experience. At 27 years old, Marcus was considered one of the most capable operators in his unit, with a reputation for staying calm under pressure and never leaving anyone behind. Delta Force, officially known as the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, was the Army's premier counterterrorism unit. Only the most elite soldiers were selected for Delta Force training, and fewer still successfully completed the grueling selection process. Marcus had been with the unit for 4 years, following 8 years of service with other Special Forces units. His record was exemplary, with decorations including the Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, and Purple Heart. What made Marcus exceptional as an operator wasn't just his technical skills or physical abilities, though both were considerable. His commanders and teammates valued him most for his analytical mind and his ability to find creative solutions to complex problems. Marcus could track enemy movements through urban environments, plan extraction routes from hostile territory, and coordinate multi-unit operations across different time zones. But perhaps most importantly, he never gave up on finding people who needed to be found. Marcus had been planning to call his family that evening to share the good news that he had received 2 weeks of leave starting the following Monday. He was looking forward to spending time on the farm, helping with the wheat harvest and catching up with Sarah about everything that had happened while he was deployed. Their last conversation 3 days earlier had been cut short when Marcus was called away for a mission briefing, and he had been thinking about Sarah and their parents during the long flight back to the United States. The first sign that something was wrong came at 7:30 p.m. Mountain Time, when Marcus tried calling Sarah's cell phone to surprise her with his news. The call went straight to voicemail, which was unusual but not necessarily alarming. Sarah often worked late during the summer months, and cell phone coverage could be spotty in some areas of the ranch. Marcus left a cheerful message asking Sarah to call him back, then tried calling the house phone. His mother Elena answered on the second ring, and Marcus could immediately hear worry in her voice. "Marcus, thank God you called," Elena said. "Sarah went to deliver hay to the Patterson Ranch this afternoon, and she should have been back hours ago. She's not answering her phone, and the Pattersons called to say she never arrived." Marcus felt his stomach drop. In his line of work, he had learned to trust his instincts, and every instinct he had was suddenly screaming that Sarah was in serious danger. "When did she leave, Mum?" "Around 2:30 this afternoon. It's only a 15-mile drive, so she should have been back by 4 o'clock at the latest. We called Sheriff Morrison about an hour ago, and he said he'd send a deputy to drive the route and look for her truck." Marcus looked at his watch. It was 9:45 p.m. Eastern Time, which meant it was 7:45 p.m. in Montana. Sarah had been missing for over 5 hours. "Has the deputy found anything yet?" "Sheriff Morrison called about 20 minutes ago. Deputy Williams found Sarah's truck pulled off on County Road 47, but there's no sign of Sarah anywhere." Marcus, her purse was still in the truck, and there were tire marks all around the area that looked like motorcycles. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning in his apartment. During his 12 years in Special Forces, he had seen enough evil in the world to know exactly what motorcycle tire marks around an abandoned truck belonging to a young woman usually meant. The scenario that was forming in his mind made him feel physically sick, but it also triggered the tactical mindset that had kept him alive through dozens of dangerous missions. "Mum, I need you to listen carefully," Marcus said, switching into the calm, authoritative voice he used when briefing his team before operations. "First, has anyone contacted the state police and the FBI? This is potentially a federal crime, and they have resources that the local sheriff doesn't. Sheriff Morrison said he was going to contact the state police, but I don't know about the FBI." "Okay. I want you to call Sheriff Morrison right now and tell him that Sarah's brother is active duty Special Forces, and that we need every available law enforcement resource focused on finding her immediately. Tell him to contact the FBI field office in Billings and request immediate assistance." Elena's voice was shaking. "Marcus, what do you think happened to her?" Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, trying to balance his need to be honest with his mother, with his desire not to terrify her even more than she already was. "I don't know yet, Mum, but I'm going to find out. I want you and Dad to stay by the phone in case Sarah tries to call home. Don't leave the house, and if anyone calls with information about Sarah, get their name and number and tell them I'll call them back. Are you coming home?" "I'm already packing. I'll be on the road within an hour, and I'll drive straight through. That means I'll be home by tomorrow evening at the latest." What Marcus didn't tell his mother was that he was already mentally preparing for a very different kind of mission than anything he had done for the army. If Sarah had been kidnapped by the kind of people who left motorcycle tire marks around abandoned vehicles, then law enforcement might not be enough to get her back safely. Marcus had skills and resources that even the FBI didn't have, and he was prepared to use all of them. After ending the call with his mother, Marcus immediately contacted his commanding officer, Colonel James Harrison. Colonel Harrison had been with Delta Force for 15 years and understood both the capabilities and the limitations of his operators. He also understood that when family members of his soldiers were in danger, those soldiers would move heaven and earth to help them, with or without official authorization. "Sir, I need to request emergency leave," Marcus said when Colonel Harrison answered his phone. "My sister has been kidnapped in Montana, and I need to get home immediately." Colonel Harrison had been Marcus's commander for 2 years and knew him well enough to recognize when the sergeant was operating in full tactical mode. "Give me the details." Marcus quickly explained what he knew about Sarah's disappearance, the discovery of her abandoned truck, and the evidence suggesting she had been taken by multiple people on motorcycles. As he spoke, Marcus could hear Colonel Harrison taking notes. "Marcus, you know I have to ask this, but I need you to promise me that you're going home as Sarah's brother, not as a Delta Force operator. The FBI and state police have jurisdiction here, and we cannot have military personnel conducting unauthorized operations on U.S. soil." Marcus understood what his colonel was really asking. "Sir, I understand the restrictions on military operations within the United States. I'm requesting leave to assist my family during a crisis, and I will cooperate fully with law enforcement." "That's the right answer. But I know you well enough to be worried about what you might do if law enforcement isn't moving fast enough for your liking. These situations are emotionally charged, and even our best people can make mistakes when family is involved." "Colonel, my sister is everything to me. I'll do whatever it takes to get her back safely, but I won't do anything stupid that would compromise the investigation or put her in more danger." Colonel Harrison was quiet for a moment. "Your leave is approved, effective immediately. Take as much time as you need. But Marcus, I want you to check in with me every 12 hours so I know what's happening. And if this situation escalates beyond what local law enforcement can handle, I want to be notified immediately." "Thank you, sir." "And Marcus?" "Bring her home." After ending the call with his colonel, Marcus began making preparations that went well beyond simply packing clothes for a trip home. His apartment contained equipment and supplies that weren't available to most people, including advanced surveillance gear, secure communications equipment, and detailed maps of the entire United States. More importantly, Marcus had access to databases and information networks that would allow him to research the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club and track their movements with capabilities that far exceeded what local law enforcement could manage. Marcus's first step was to contact his network of former teammates and Special Forces colleagues who were stationed around the country. Within an hour, he had reached out to 12 different operators who were positioned to assist if needed. 3 of them were based in Montana, Colorado, and Wyoming, close enough to provide immediate support if the situation required it. Next, Marcus began researching motorcycle clubs that operated in the Montana region. Using military intelligence databases that he technically wasn't supposed to access for personal reasons, Marcus quickly identified the Iron Wolves as a known criminal organization, with chapters in 6 western states. The club was involved in drug trafficking, weapons dealing, and human trafficking, with a particularly violent reputation, even among other outlaw motorcycle clubs. What Marcus learned about the Iron Wolves made his blood run cold. The club had been linked to at least 8 disappearances of young women over the past 5 years, though law enforcement had never been able to prove their involvement or locate the victims. The club's members were known for targeting isolated victims in rural areas where they could operate without interference from law enforcement. The leader of the Iron Wolves was Robert "Cobra" Thompson, a 48-year-old career criminal with convictions for assault, drug trafficking, and weapons violations. Thompson had served 2 prison terms but had been released most recently 3 years earlier. Intelligence reports indicated that Thompson was considered extremely dangerous and was believed to be involved in organizing the club's most serious criminal activities. Marcus spent 2 hours studying everything he could find about the Iron Wolves, including photographs of known members, information about their motorcycles and equipment, and intelligence about their typical operating patterns. By the time he finished his research, Marcus had developed a preliminary profile of the people who had taken his sister and a rough idea of where they might be heading. The Iron Wolves typically operated in remote areas of Montana, Wyoming, and the Dakotas, using abandoned buildings and isolated campsites as temporary bases of operation. The club owned several pieces of property in the region, including an abandoned mining camp in northern Wyoming and a remote ranch in eastern Montana that had been purchased through a series of shell companies. Most importantly, Marcus learned that the Iron Wolves had a pattern of holding victims for several days before moving them to other locations or, in the worst cases, disposing of them entirely. This meant that Sarah might still be alive, but time was critical. Every hour that passed reduced the chances of finding her before something terrible happened. As Marcus loaded his vehicle for the 17-hour drive to Montana, he was already developing a plan that went far beyond simply cooperating with law enforcement. If the FBI and state police couldn't locate Sarah quickly, Marcus was prepared to use his Special Forces training to conduct his own search and rescue mission. The Iron Wolves had made the mistake of targeting the sister of someone who had spent 12 years learning how to track down and eliminate dangerous people in the most hostile environments on Earth. They were about to discover that Delta Force operators don't just rescue hostages in foreign countries. Sometimes they rescue family members too. Marcus pulled out of the Fort Bragg parking area at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time, beginning a drive that would take him across 7 states and 17 hours of some of the most intense thinking he had ever done. Somewhere in the vast wilderness of the American West, his sister was being held by people who had no idea they had just declared war on one of the most dangerous soldiers in the United States military. As Marcus drove through the North Carolina countryside in the darkness, he was already mentally preparing for a mission unlike any he had ever undertaken. The rules would be different, and the stakes would be higher than anything he had faced in Syria, Iraq, or Afghanistan. This time, it was personal. Marcus arrived at the Martinez family farm just after 3 p.m. on Wednesday, having driven 17 hours straight through 7 states with only brief stops for fuel. The landscape of eastern Montana had never looked more beautiful or more ominous to him as he turned into the gravel driveway leading to the house where he had grown up. Every mile of the drive home had been spent mentally preparing for what he knew would be the most important mission of his career. The Martinez farmhouse was exactly as Marcus remembered it. a two-story white building with a wraparound porch that his great-grandfather had built in 1954. The sight of his childhood home should have been comforting, but instead it reminded Marcus of everything he stood to lose if he couldn't find Sarah. This was where she should be right now, working in the garden behind the house or helping their mother prepare dinner. Elena Martinez met Marcus at the front door before he had even turned off his vehicle. His mother looked like she had aged years in the 24 hours since Sarah's disappearance. Her eyes were red from crying, and Marcus could see the deep worry lines that had appeared on her face overnight. "Any news?" Marcus asked as he embraced his mother. "Nothing good," Elena replied. "The FBI arrived this morning, and they've taken over the investigation. They found evidence at the scene that confirms Sarah was taken by force, but they haven't been able to identify who took her or where she might be." Marcus walked into the house where he found his father, Thomas, sitting at the kitchen table with Sheriff Morrison and 2 FBI agents. Thomas Martinez looked older and frailer than Marcus remembered, a reminder of the heart attack that had changed all their lives 2 years earlier. The stress of Sarah's disappearance was clearly taking a toll on his already compromised health. Sheriff Morrison was a man Marcus had known since childhood, a competent law enforcement officer who was nevertheless clearly in over his head with a case involving organized crime and potential human trafficking. The 2 FBI agents, Special Agent Jennifer Coleman and Special Agent Mike Torres, looked more capable but also appeared frustrated with the lack of progress in their investigation. "Marcus," Sheriff Morrison said, standing to shake hands, "I'm sorry we're meeting again under these circumstances. These are Special Agents Coleman and Torres from the FBI field office in Billings." Special Agent Coleman was a woman in her early 40s with short blonde hair and the kind of direct manner that Marcus associated with experienced law enforcement professionals. "Mr. Martinez, we understand you're active duty military. Can you tell us what unit you're with?" Marcus had spent the drive home, deciding how much to reveal about his military background. On one hand, his Special Forces training and resources could be invaluable in finding Sarah. On the other hand, he needed to be careful not to interfere with the official investigation or reveal classified information about his unit's capabilities. "I'm with Army Special Forces," Marcus said. "I've been deployed for the past 6 months, but I came home as soon as I heard about Sarah." Special Agent Torres, a Hispanic man in his 30s with an impressive military bearing of his own, studied Marcus carefully. "What kind of work do you do with Special Forces?" "I can't discuss specifics, but I have experience with tracking and reconnaissance operations." Agent Coleman exchanged a look with her partner before continuing. "Mr. P.H. Martinez, we appreciate your concern for your sister, and we understand that your military background might make you want to get involved in searching for her. However, I need to make it clear that this is a federal investigation, and we cannot have civilians conducting their own operations." Marcus nodded, but he was already thinking about how to access the information he needed without officially interfering with the FBI investigation. "I understand. What can you tell me about what you've found so far?" Sheriff Morrison spoke up. "The evidence at the scene confirms that Sarah was taken by a large group of motorcyclists. We found tire tracks from at least 30 different bikes, along with evidence of a struggle near her truck. We also found her cell phone, which had been smashed." Agent Torres added, "We've identified the motorcycle club responsible. The Iron Wolves are a known criminal organization with a history of violence and drug trafficking. We've issued federal warrants for several known members, and we have investigators checking all of their known properties and associates." Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction that his research from the previous night had been accurate, but he also felt frustrated that the FBI was focusing on known properties and associates. In his experience, criminal organizations like the Iron Wolves rarely used predictable locations when they were holding hostages. "How many members does this club have?" Marcus asked. "Approximately 60 active members across 6 states, Agent Coleman replied. "We believe the group that took your sister consists of the club's core leadership, maybe 30 to 35 individuals." Thomas Martinez spoke for the first time since Marcus had arrived. "How do we know Sarah is still alive?" The question hung in the air for a moment before Agent Torres answered carefully. "We don't have any evidence that she's been harmed, and the Iron Wolves have a history of holding victims for several days before moving them. We're working on the assumption that we still have time to find her." Marcus appreciated the agent's honesty, but he also recognized the unspoken implication. The Iron Wolves had a history of human trafficking, which meant that Sarah was probably being held alive for now. But her situation would become much more dangerous if she was moved to a secondary location. After the law enforcement officers left to continue their investigation, Marcus sat down with his parents to discuss the situation more frankly. He needed to understand exactly what had happened and what resources were available. But he also needed to prepare his parents for the possibility that the official investigation might not be successful. "Tell me everything that happened yesterday," Marcus said.
And
"I need to understand Sarah's routine, who she talked to, and anything unusual that might have happened recently." Elena walked Marcus through Sarah's activities on the day she disappeared. Sarah had spent the morning working in the barn, organizing feed and supplies. She had lunch with Elena and discussed plans for the wheat harvest. Around 2 p.m., she loaded hay bales onto the truck to deliver to the Patterson Ranch, a routine trip she had made dozens of times before. "Was anyone else supposed to be with her?" Marcus asked. "No, she always made those deliveries alone. The Pattersons are good friends, and it's not a difficult drive. Sarah has been doing it for 2 years, without any problems," Thomas added. "The only unusual thing was that she got a phone call that morning that seemed to upset her a little." Marcus looked up sharply. "What kind of phone call?" "I don't know," Thomas replied. "I was in the barn when the phone rang." Elena took the call and then went to find Sarah. When Sarah came back to the house, she seemed worried about something, but she said it was nothing important. Elena looked confused. "I don't remember any phone call that upset Sarah." "It was around 10 a.m., Thomas said. "Someone called asking for Sarah specifically, and when you told them she was working in the barn, they said they would call back later. When Sarah came in for lunch, she asked if anyone had called for her." Marcus felt his investigative instincts kicking in. "Did Sarah say anything about expecting a call, or about anyone she was supposed to talk to?" "No," Elena said. "But she did seem a little distracted during lunch. I asked her if everything was okay, and she said someone had asked her about selling hay to a new customer, but the caller had been vague about details. This was potentially important information that the FBI might not have discovered yet." Marcus made a mental note to follow up on the mysterious phone call, which could have been reconnaissance by the Iron Wolves to confirm Sarah's location and routine. As evening approached, Marcus walked around the farm property, ostensibly to clear his head, but actually to start planning his own search operation. The Martinez farm was isolated enough that Marcus could use it as a base of operations without attracting attention from law enforcement. More importantly, the farm had outbuildings where Marcus could store equipment and supplies that he couldn't keep at his parents' house. That evening, after his parents had gone to bed, Marcus began making phone calls to his network of Special Forces colleagues. His first call was to Sergeant First Class Tony Rodriguez, a former Delta Force operator who had left the military 2 years earlier and was now working as a private security contractor in Denver. "Marcus, I heard about your sister through the network," Tony said. "What do you need?" "I need information, and I need it fast," Marcus replied. "The FBI is working the case, but I don't think they understand what they're dealing with. These Iron Wolves aren't just drug dealers or thieves. They're predators, and they're good at disappearing." "What kind of information?" "Everything. Financial records, phone intercepts, vehicle tracking, satellite imagery. I need to know where this club has been and where they might be going." Tony was quiet for a moment. "Marcus, what you're talking about requires resources that aren't exactly legal for civilian use. Are you sure you want to go down this road?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "These people have my sister Tony. They're going to kill her, or worse if I don't find her. I'll worry about the legal consequences later." "Okay, give me 12 hours. I'll see what I can pull together." Marcus's next call was to Master Sergeant Lisa Chen, a current Delta Force operator who specialized in electronic surveillance and communications intercept. Lisa was stationed at Fort Carson in Colorado, close enough to assist if needed. "I can't give you direct support because this is a domestic situation," Lisa said, "but I can put you in touch with some people who aren't technically military anymore." "What kind of people?" "The kind who have the same skills we do, but without the same restrictions on where they can use them." By midnight, Marcus had contacted 8 former Special Forces operators who were positioned around the western United States. 3 of them were already en route to Montana, bringing equipment and expertise that would allow Marcus to conduct a search operation that paralleled the official FBI investigation. Marcus's plan was simple but ambitious. While the FBI focused on known Iron Wolves properties and associates, Marcus would use military-grade surveillance and tracking techniques to identify the club's actual location. The Iron Wolves might be experienced criminals, but they had never been hunted by someone with Marcus's training and resources. The next morning, Marcus received a call from Tony Rodriguez with the first piece of crucial intelligence. "I've been tracking credit card and cell phone activity for known Iron Wolves members," Tony said. "Most of their phones went dark yesterday afternoon, but I found something interesting. 3 members made purchases at a truck stop near Billings yesterday evening, and one of them used a credit card that's been linked to Iron Wolves operations." "What kind of purchases?" Food, fuel, and camping supplies. Enough for a large group planning to stay in a remote location for several days. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. This was the first real lead about where the Iron Wolves might be holding Sarah. Did you get vehicle descriptions? Better than that. The truck stop has security cameras, and I was able to identify the specific motorcycles. I'm sending you license plate numbers and photos right now. Marcus spent the next hour studying the intelligence that Tony had gathered. The photographs from the truck stop showed 3 Iron Wolves members, including one who matched the description of Robert Cobra Thompson. More importantly, the timing and location of their purchases suggested they were heading towards a specific destination rather than simply fleeing randomly. Using topographic maps and satellite imagery, Marcus began analyzing potential locations where a large group of motorcycles could hide while keeping prisoners. The area north of Billings included thousands of square miles of remote wilderness, with countless abandoned mining camps, hunting cabins, and ranch buildings that could serve as temporary hideouts. However, Marcus's military training had taught him to think like his enemies. The Iron Wolves weren't just hiding. They were probably planning their next move. If they were involved in human trafficking, as the FBI believed, then they would need access to transportation routes that would allow them to move Sarah to a different location. Marcus identified 3 potential areas where the Iron Wolves could be operating: an abandoned mining district in the Little Belt Mountains, a series of remote ranches near the Wyoming border, or the Badlands region along the Missouri River. Each location offered isolation and concealment, but also access to major highways that could be used for transportation. The key to finding Sarah would be determining which location the Iron Wolves had chosen and getting there before they decided to move her again. Marcus was running out of time. But for the first time since receiving the phone call about Sarah's disappearance, he felt like he was gaining ground on the people who had taken her. The Iron Wolves had made a crucial mistake by stopping at that truck stop. They had no idea that their movements were being tracked by someone who had spent 12 years perfecting the art of hunting dangerous people in hostile territory. Now Marcus was coming for them, and he was bringing friends. By Thursday morning, Marcus had assembled a team that would have impressed any Special Forces commander. Tony Rodriguez had arrived from Denver with a vehicle full of surveillance equipment and weapons that weren't exactly available through normal civilian channels. Sergeant First Class Jake Wilson, a former Delta Force sniper, had driven up from Colorado Springs with precision rifles and long-range reconnaissance gear. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, who had left the military 6 months earlier after 8 years in Special Forces, brought electronic warfare equipment and drone surveillance capabilities. The team gathered in the old machine shop on the Martinez farm, a building that provided privacy and enough space to set up their equipment without attracting attention. Marcus had told his parents that some of his military friends were coming to help with the search, which was technically true, even if it didn't fully explain the scope of what they were planning. Okay, let's review what we know, Marcus said, pointing to a large map of Montana and Wyoming that covered one wall of the machine shop. The Iron Wolves were last confirmed near Billings on Tuesday evening. Tony's intelligence suggests they're operating somewhere in this region. He indicated a circle encompassing roughly 5,000 square miles of remote territory. Tony Rodriguez, a compact man with the weathered appearance of someone who had spent years in hostile environments, added, "I've been monitoring communications intercepts, and we picked up some interesting radio chatter last night. Someone using Iron Wolf's call signs was discussing a package delivery scheduled for Friday evening." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Package delivery was likely code for moving Sarah to another location, or, worse, disposing of her entirely. They had less than 24 hours to find her before the situation became much more dangerous. Jake Wilson, tall and lean, with the kind of intense focus that made him an exceptional sniper, studied the topographic map. If they're planning to move someone on Friday evening, they need to be somewhere with road access but still isolated enough for security. That eliminates most of the mining camps and puts us looking at the ranch properties along the major highways. Maria Santos, a dark-haired woman with an impressive background in electronic warfare, was monitoring multiple communications channels simultaneously. "I'm picking up cell phone activity in 3 general areas that match our target profile. The strongest signal cluster is coming from somewhere near the Wyoming border, approximately 40 miles southeast of Billings." Marcus moved to the map and studied the area Maria had identified. That puts them in the Pryor Mountains region. Lots of remote ranch property, several abandoned homesteads, and good highway access for moving north to Canada or south into Wyoming and Colorado. The team spent 2 hours analyzing satellite imagery and intelligence reports to identify the most likely locations within the target area. Using military databases that Marcus technically wasn't supposed to access, they were able to identify 12 properties that met their criteria. Isolated buildings with vehicle access, no current residents, and situated along potential escape routes. We need to narrow this down, Marcus said. We can't search 12 different properties in the time we have available, and if we guess wrong, Sarah could be moved before we get another chance. Tony had been working with financial intelligence throughout the morning. I've got something that might help. One of the properties in our target area was purchased 6 months ago by a shell company that's been linked to Iron Wolf's operations. It's a former cattle ranch about 8 miles off Highway 310, with several buildings and a good view of the surrounding area. Jake Wilson examined the satellite photos of the property. This looks right. Multiple buildings for hiding vehicles and prisoners, high ground for security, and a single access road that they can watch for approaching vehicles. If I were planning this operation, this is where I would go. Marcus studied the images of the ranch property, noting the layout of buildings, the surrounding terrain, and potential approaches for a rescue mission. The main ranch house was a 2-story building that could accommodate 35 people, with a large barn that could hide motorcycles and other vehicles. Most importantly, there was a smaller outbuilding that would be perfect for holding prisoners away from the main group. This has to be it, Marcus said. The question is how we get Sarah out without getting her killed. Maria Santos had been monitoring communications from the target area. I'm detecting multiple cell phones and radio communications coming from that exact location. The signal strength suggests at least 25 to 30 people, which matches our estimate for the Iron Wolves group. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. After 2 days of searching, they had finally located the people who had taken his sister. But now came the most dangerous part of the mission, getting Sarah back safely. The team spent the next hour developing a rescue plan that took into account both their capabilities and their limitations. Unlike their military missions in foreign countries, they couldn't call for helicopter support or artillery backup if things went wrong. They were operating without official authorization, which meant they had to succeed on the first attempt, or risk making the situation worse for Sarah. Here's what we're going to do, Marcus said, pointing to the satellite images. Jake takes up an overwatch position on this ridge, about 800 meters from the main building. You'll have clear sight lines to all the structures and can provide cover fire if we need to fight our way out. Jake nodded. I can be in position by sunset and maintain observation throughout the night. Tony and I will approach from the east, using this dry creek bed for concealment. Our objective is to locate Sarah and determine how many guards we're dealing with. Maria, you'll monitor communications and be ready to jam their radio frequencies if they try to call for reinforcement. Maria Santos checked her equipment. I can also use the drone for real-time reconnaissance once you're in position. The thermal imaging will show us exactly where everyone is located inside the buildings. The plan was ambitious but achievable. Marcus had participated in dozens of similar operations during his military career, though none had been as personally important as this one. The team had the training, equipment, and motivation to succeed, but they also understood that they were taking enormous risks. One more thing, Marcus said. If this goes wrong, if we're compromised, or if law enforcement shows up, our priority is getting Sarah out safely. Everything else is secondary. As the team prepared their equipment and reviewed the mission plan, Marcus called FBI agent Coleman to update her on the situation without revealing the full extent of what he was planning. Agent Coleman, this is Marcus Martinez. I wanted to let you know that I might have some information about where my sister is being held. What kind of information? Agent Coleman asked. Marcus chose his words carefully. I've been looking at maps and thinking about where a large group of motorcycles might hide in this area. There's an abandoned ranch property southeast of Billings that seems like a logical place for them to go. Mr. Martinez, I hope you're not thinking about investigating this location yourself. Of course not, Marcus lied smoothly. I just wanted to pass along the information in case it's helpful for your investigation. Agent Coleman paused. Can you send me the exact location? We'll have it checked out. Marcus provided the coordinates of the ranch property, knowing that it would take the FBI several hours to organize a response team and reach the location. By that time, Marcus and his team would have already completed their rescue mission, one way or another. Agent Coleman, there's one more thing you should know. I heard some chatter that suggests they might be planning to move Sarah tomorrow evening. If she's at that location, you might not have much time. We'll check it out immediately. Mr. Martinez, please stay away from that area until we can secure it. Understood, Marcus said, ending the call. The sun was setting as Marcus's team loaded their vehicles and prepared to depart for the target location. Marcus had not slept for more than 2 hours since receiving the news about Sarah's disappearance, but the adrenaline of finally taking action was keeping him alert and focused. Before leaving the farm, Marcus stopped to see his parents one final time. He couldn't tell them exactly what he was planning, but he wanted them to know that he was confident about bringing Sarah home. "We think we know where Sarah is," Marcus told his parents. "Some of my friends and I are going to check it out tonight." Elena Martinez looked at her son with the kind of understanding that only comes from being the mother of a soldier. "Be careful, Marcus. I can't lose both of my children." "You won't lose either of us, Mom. I promise." The drive to the target location took 45 minutes along back roads that wound through some of the most remote country in Montana. Marcus used the time to mentally rehearse the mission plan and to prepare himself for what he might find when they reached the ranch property. During his military career, Marcus had rescued hostages from terrorist camps, drug cartels, and armed militias. But this mission felt different because it was personal. The people holding Sarah weren't enemy soldiers or foreign terrorists. They were American criminals who had made the mistake of targeting the wrong family. As they approached the target area, Marcus felt the familiar calm focus that always came over him before dangerous operations. His team was ready, his equipment was prepared, and his mission was clear. All that remained was to execute the plan and bring his sister home. Jake Wilson had already moved into his overwatch position and was providing reconnaissance reports via encrypted radio. "I have eyes on the target location. Multiple heat signatures in the main building, several motorcycles in the barn, and what appears to be a single guard posted near the smaller outbuilding." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. The smaller outbuilding was where they expected to find Sarah, and the presence of a guard suggested that their intelligence was correct. "Copy that, Jake. Tony and I are moving into position. Maria, start monitoring their communications." As Marcus and Tony Rodriguez began their approach toward the ranch buildings, Marcus thought about all the times he had told Sarah to be careful, to watch out for dangerous people, to always let someone know where she was going. He had never imagined that despite all those precautions, she would be kidnapped by criminals who thought they could disappear into the vastness of the American West. The Iron Wolves were about to learn that some people don't just disappear when Delta Force comes looking for them. They were about to discover that taking Sarah Martinez had been the biggest mistake of their criminal careers. In 30 minutes, Marcus would either have his sister back safely, or the Iron Wolves would find out what happens when you declare war on America's most elite soldiers. Either way, the hunt was about to end. Marcus and Tony Rodriguez moved through the darkness like ghosts, using every piece of cover available as they approached the ranch buildings. The night was moonless and overcast, providing excellent concealment for their approach, but also making navigation more challenging. Marcus relied on the GPS coordinates and thermal imaging data from Maria's drone to guide them toward the smaller outbuilding, where they believed Sarah was being held. Jake Wilson's voice came through their encrypted radio system. "I count 32 individuals in the main building, mostly gathered in what appears to be the kitchen and living room areas. The guard near the smaller building is alone and appears to be armed with a pistol. I'm not seeing any other external security." Marcus felt a surge of hope. The Iron Wolves had grown overconfident after 2 days without any sign of pursuit. They had posted only minimal security and were clearly not expecting a rescue attempt. That overconfidence was about to cost them everything. As Marcus and Tony reached the dry creek bed that would provide them with concealed access to the building where Sarah was being held, Marcus thought about everything that had led to this moment. 48 hours earlier, he had been a soldier preparing for a routine leave period. Now he was conducting the most important mission of his career, using skills learned in the world's most dangerous places to rescue the person who meant more to him than anyone else in the world. The smaller outbuilding was a converted bunkhouse that had been used to house ranch workers during the property's operational years. It was approximately 50 meters from the main ranch house, close enough for the Iron Wolves to maintain control, but far enough away to muffle sounds that they didn't want the entire group to hear. Marcus and Tony reached the edge of the creek bed and prepared for the final approach to the building. The single guard was positioned near the front door, smoking a cigarette and occasionally walking around the perimeter of the building. Marcus studied the man's patrol pattern and identified a window on the back wall that would provide access to the building. "Jake, can you see the guard's position?" Marcus whispered into his radio. "Affirmative. He's facing away from your approach route. You have a clear window for the next 3 minutes." Marcus and Tony moved swiftly but silently across the open ground between the creek bed and the building. Marcus had performed similar approaches countless times during his military career, but never with such personal stakes. If they were discovered now, the Iron Wolves might kill Sarah before Marcus could reach her. The window at the back of the building was unlocked, a security oversight that Marcus appreciated. He carefully opened the window and climbed inside, followed by Tony. The interior of the building was dark except for a small amount of light coming from under a door that led to what appeared to be a separate room. Marcus could hear voices from behind the door, and his blood ran cold when he recognized one of them as Sarah. She was alive, but she sounded frightened and weak. Marcus motioned for Tony to cover the window, while he approached the door to assess the situation inside the room. Through a crack in the door, Marcus could see Sarah sitting on an old cot, her hands zip-tied behind her back and her feet bound with rope. She had bruises on her face and arms, evidence that the Iron Wolves had not treated her gently, but she appeared to be alert and aware of her surroundings. 2 Iron Wolves members were in the room with Sarah. One was sitting in a chair near the door, holding a pistol and drinking from a beer bottle. The other was standing near Sarah, occasionally making threatening comments about what would happen to her if she didn't cooperate with their plans. Marcus felt a rage unlike anything he had ever experienced during his military career. The professional detachment that had served him well in combat operations disappeared as he watched these men terrorize his sister. But Marcus also recognized that his anger could be dangerous if he didn't control it. Sarah's safety depended on him executing this rescue perfectly. Marcus carefully opened the door and moved into the room with the silent precision that had made him one of Delta Force's most effective operators. The Iron Wolves member sitting in the chair never knew what hit him. Marcus struck him in the temple with a precise blow that rendered him unconscious instantly, catching his body before it could fall and make noise. The second Iron Wolf turned toward the sound of Marcus's movement, but before he could raise his weapon or call for help, Marcus had crossed the room and applied a chokehold that cut off the man's air supply. Within seconds, the Iron Wolf was unconscious and no longer a threat. Sarah's eyes widened in shock and relief when she recognized her brother. Marcus?
How did you...
Shh, Marcus whispered as he cut the zip ties and rope that bound her.
We need to get out of here right now.
Sarah stood up unsteadily, clearly weakened by her ordeal but determined to escape. There are more of them in the main building. At least 30 guys, and their leader is completely insane. I know. My team is in position to cover our escape. Can you walk? Yes. Marcus, they were planning to sell me to someone tomorrow night. They were talking about driving me to Denver to meet some kind of buyer. Marcus felt his rage intensify, but he forced himself to focus on the immediate task of getting Sarah to safety. We'll deal with them later. Right now, we need to move. Marcus helped Sarah toward the window where Tony was waiting to assist their escape. As they prepared to leave the building, Marcus could hear increased activity from the main ranch house. Someone had apparently discovered that the guard was missing, and voices were being raised in alarm. Jake, what's your status? Marcus whispered into his radio. The guard just went inside the main building, and now there's a lot of movement. I think they know something's wrong. Marcus realized they had only minutes before the Iron Wolves discovered that Sarah was missing and began searching for her. The team needed to get away from the immediate area before the bikers could organize a pursuit. Marcus and Tony helped Sarah through the window and began moving quickly toward their extraction point near the creek bed. Sarah was weaker than Marcus had hoped, requiring assistance to maintain the pace necessary to reach safety before they were discovered. As they reached the creek bed, lights began coming on throughout the ranch property. Marcus could hear shouting from the direction of the smaller building where they had found Sarah, and the sound of motorcycle engines starting up in the barn. They know she's gone, Tony observed. How do you want to handle this? Marcus looked at his sister, who was safe but still in danger as long as the Iron Wolves were capable of pursuing them. Then he thought about all the other young women who might be targeted by this criminal organization if they were allowed to continue operating. Maria, can you jam their radio communications? Already done. They can't coordinate with each other or call for outside assistance. Jake, can you disable their vehicles without putting Sarah at risk? Affirmative. I have clear shots at the motorcycles in the barn. Give me 30 seconds. Marcus heard the distinctive sound of Jake's precision rifle as he systematically disabled the Iron Wolves' motorcycles. Each shot was carefully placed to destroy engines or fuel tanks, ensuring that the bikers would not be able to pursue their escaping prisoners or flee before law enforcement arrived. Tony, get Sarah to the vehicles and call the FBI. Tell them we have Sarah safe and that the Iron Wolves are at this location. What about you? Tony asked. Marcus looked back toward the ranch buildings where the Iron Wolves were discovering the extent of their situation. They had lost their prisoner, their communications, and their vehicles, but Marcus wasn't finished with them yet. I'm going to make sure they understand that taking my sister was a mistake they'll never make again. Sarah grabbed Marcus's arm. Marcus, no. You got me out. That's enough. Let's just go home. Marcus looked at his sister and saw the fear and trauma that the Iron Wolves had inflicted on her. These men had terrorized an innocent young woman for their own twisted pleasure, and they had been planning to sell her into even worse circumstances. The law would eventually punish them, but Marcus wanted to make sure they understood the personal consequences of their actions. "I'll be right behind you," Marcus promised Sarah. "But these people need to know what happens when they target our family." Tony Rodriguez understood exactly what Marcus was planning. He had served with Marcus long enough to know that some situations required more than just rescuing the victim. Sometimes justice required making sure the perpetrators never considered similar actions again. 5 minutes, Tony said. "Then we're leaving with or without you." Marcus moved back toward the ranch buildings where the Iron Wolves were trying to organize a response to their situation. Without communications or transportation, they were trapped and confused. Exactly the state that Marcus wanted them in. Robert Cobra Thompson was standing in the yard between the buildings, shouting orders at his subordinates and trying to understand how their operation had been compromised so completely. Marcus approached to within 50 meters of the group, close enough to be clearly heard, but far enough away to maintain tactical advantage. "Cobra Thompson," Marcus called out, causing the entire group of bikers to turn toward his voice. Marcus stepped into the light from the ranch house porch, allowing the Iron Wolves to see him clearly. He was wearing military fatigues and carrying weapons that identified him as someone with serious training and capabilities. "Who the hell are you?" Cobra demanded. "I'm Sarah Martinez's brother," Marcus replied. "You made the mistake of taking someone who's under the protection of Delta Force." The Iron Wolves exchanged uncertain glances. Most of them had heard of Delta Force, and they were beginning to understand that they had stumbled into a situation far beyond their ability to handle. "You took my sister from a peaceful farming community where she was hurting no one," Marcus continued. "You terrorized her, you planned to sell her, and you thought you could disappear into the wilderness without consequences." Cobra tried to maintain his authority over the situation. "You're just one guy, there are 30 of us. Take a look around," Marcus said. "Your motorcycles are disabled. Your communications are jammed. You're trapped in the middle of nowhere with no way to escape, and the FBI will be here within the hour to arrest all of you for kidnapping and human trafficking." Several of the Iron Wolves were beginning to look nervous as they realized the truth of Marcus's words. They had gone from being predators in control of the situation to being trapped prey with no way out. "But before the FBI gets here," Marcus continued, "I want you to understand something. If any member of your organization ever comes near my family again, if you ever target another innocent woman in Montana, if you ever even think about continuing your criminal activities after you get out of prison, I will find you. And what happened here tonight will seem like a friendly warning compared to what I'll do to you next time." Marcus paused to let his words sink in before delivering his final message. "Delta Force doesn't just operate in foreign countries, we protect American families too. And some of those families have brothers who are very, very good at finding people who don't want to be found." Without waiting for a response, Marcus melted back into the darkness and returned to where Tony and Sarah were waiting with their vehicles. Within minutes, they were driving away from the ranch property, leaving the Iron Wolves to wait for the arrival of federal law enforcement officers who would find them trapped, disarmed, and completely demoralized. As they drove toward home, Sarah sat quietly in the passenger seat, processing everything that had happened to her over the past 3 days. Finally, she turned to Marcus and spoke. "Thank you for coming for me," she said simply. "I'll always come for you," Marcus replied. "That's what family does." 2 hours later, as they turned into the driveway of the Martinez family farm, Marcus could see his parents waiting on the front porch. Elena and Thomas Martinez had spent 3 days not knowing if they would ever see their daughter again. Now they were about to learn that their son had brought her home safely. The Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club was arrested that night and eventually convicted on federal charges related to kidnapping, human trafficking, and weapons violations. Robert Cobra Thompson received a sentence of 25 years in federal prison. Most of the other club members received sentences ranging from 10 to 15 years. More importantly, the club's criminal operations were completely dismantled. The successful rescue of Sarah Martinez and the arrest of the Iron Wolves sent a message throughout the criminal underworld that some victims were protected by forces that most criminals had never encountered. Marcus returned to duty with Delta Force 6 weeks later, but not before helping Sarah recover from her trauma and ensuring that the family farm had additional security measures in place. The experience had reminded him why he had joined the military in the first place, to protect innocent people from those who had harmed them. Sarah eventually returned to her normal routine on the farm, though she was never quite the same after her ordeal. She became an advocate for victims of human trafficking and worked with law enforcement agencies to help other families who faced similar situations. The Martinez family never spoke publicly about the details of Sarah's rescue, but the story became legend among Special Forces units throughout the military. Instructors began using it as an example of how elite soldiers can use their skills to protect American families, even when operating outside of official channels. The last entry in the FBI case file noted that the Iron Wolves had been taken down by unknown individuals with advanced military training. The agents investigating the case suspected that Marcus Martinez had been involved in his sister's rescue, but they were unable to prove it and chose not to pursue the matter further. Justice had been served, and the Martinez family was whole again. For Marcus, that was the most successful mission he had ever completed.